It's an early morning of February 24th, 2022. Russian forces in Belgorod region, that for months were amassing on the Ukrainian border under the cover of the military exercises, are now ready to fulfill their true mission. 3 Russian armies, 1st Guards Tank, 20th Guards Combined Arms, and 6th Combined Arms plan to launch a land attack on one of the key Ukrainian cities. In total, they have around 20,000 men, with hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles, backed up with rocket and conventional artillery. Their target is the second largest city in Ukraine, Kharkiv, major industrial, economic, and cultural center with pre-war population of 1.5 million people. After the capital Kyiv, it has the second largest number of military-related enterprises, such as tanks and armored vehicle factories, as well as suppliers of a variety of military aviation components. Due to the city's significance for Ukraine and its location, disguised Russian forces with separatists tried to seize control over the city in 2014, as they did in Luhansk and Donetsk, but were defeated by civilians and Ukrainian security forces. Therefore, in the 2022 Russian military campaign, Kharkiv became one of the priority targets for what seemed to be a quick and easy military operation. At 5 am on February 24th, the cruise missiles launched from the Russian Tu-22 bombers hit the base of the 92nd Mechanized Brigade at military airfield in Kyiv, as well as other military infrastructure objects across the region. The first satellite images of the airfield show the smoke pouring out of the fuel tanks. However, the only planes that are destroyed or damaged are 5 L-39 trainer aircraft. Russian missile also hits a civilian building. Four Turkish-made TB2 Bayraktar drones were also lost due to mysterious sabotage of the crews. In response, the 92nd and 93rd Mechanized Brigades of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, as well as 40th Artillery Brigade, are immediately deployed on the positions near the border. Before starting their land invasion, Russians used their overwhelming advantage in the artillery that they have amassed on their own land. Since Kharkiv is separated from Russia by only 30 kilometers of mostly flat fields, heavy artillery strikes on the border are seen from the city. Soon, Kharkiv itself is attacked by Russian multiple rocket launcher systems. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops mostly retreat from the border. This maneuver allows moving most of the Ukrainian forces to the positions that were not previously discovered by the enemy artillery. However, the invaders win over the land and initiative, as Russian tank columns break through the Ukrainian border around 6 am, in many areas without much resistance. As the main attack force advances further, they encounter an exponentially growing degree of resistance, since Ukrainians know the area better. But the advance is quite rapid, so the Russian command does not change tactics, as they still plan to arrive at the city doorstep in hours. Around 10 am, the first Russian tanks and armored vehicles arrive at the town of Tsirkuni and try to cross one of the circular highways. There, they meet Ukrainian troops of the 92nd Mechanized Brigade on BTR force, Cossack IMVs, and with the support of T-64. The Intensified ends with the destruction of Russian IFVs as well as the T-80 that lost its turret due to munition detonation. It was most likely destroyed with American-made Javelin ATGM. Ukrainians lost one BTR-4 and Cossack vehicle. This is one of the first recorded losses of Russian military in the conflict. Invaders continue their attempts to enter the city, but each new group of vehicles that was sent on the reconnaissance mission does not come back or retreats with heavy casualties. The main columns stall and start to set up temporary positions in the towns that were captured earlier, constantly repelling multiple Ukrainian attacks. The same thing happens with other Russian formations that attacked Kharkiv. By the end of the day, it becomes clear that 92nd and 93rd Mechanized Brigades of the Ukrainian forces, as well as 40th Artillery Brigade, have managed to concentrate highly maneuverable defensive units around the city that mitigated multiple attacks due to high mobility and modern anti-tank weapons. As heavy battles continue through the night, and Russian forces are exhausted by the constant Ukrainian hit-and-run style attacks, they abandoned the idea of simply rolling into the city in columns of armor. Surprisingly, it looks like it was their initial plan, as the Russian military command thought that a simple show of force can win the city that, according to the Russian media, was waiting for liberation. On February 25th, the shellings of Kharkiv civilian infrastructure intensifies, as Russians start using cluster and incendiary munitions, as well as aviation. As noted earlier, the main defensive lines of the Ukrainians were set up outside of the city and consisted of multiple groups of mechanized forces, so shelling did little harm to the defenders. The idea behind it was to break the will to fight of many city residents who took arms against the invaders and again rely on the show of force and spread of fear and panic. Every day from now on, more and more city buildings are destroyed by the Russian artillery, including medical facilities, schools, universities, churches, administrative buildings, and the main gas pipeline. However, Kharkiv residents, as well as the rest of the world, see the heavy shellings of the city as a sign of desperation of the stalled armored fist of the invaders. As in many other Ukrainian cities, the lines of the volunteers form around the official and improvised enlistment offices, where all residents can receive firearms. In a couple of weeks, all these people will be organized into 113th and 127th separate territorial defense brigades that both defended the outer perimeter with armed forces as well as look for the infiltrated saboteurs inside the city. One of the Russian columns, consisting mostly of OMON, a special police unit integrated with Russian National Guard, was moving between Shestakov and Kutuzivka towns. They were supposed to suppress any protests once the Russian army enters the city, so they traveled mostly on paddy wagons, loaded with riot shields and other equipment of this kind. 2 Ukrainian T-64 tanks meet them head-on and open fire. Unarmored trucks and other supply vehicles turned into wrecks in a matter of minutes, and tanks together with the 6th Mechanized Company of the 92nd Brigade that approaches column from the end destroy in total over 25 vehicles. Russian troops request help and regular military units arrive, but rather late. This is one of the many examples of the above-mentioned hit-and-run style tactics employed by the 92nd and 93rd Mechanized Brigades to combat much more numerous Russian forces.
Смотрите, друзья, разбитая колонна россиян, здоровеннейшая, не знаю сколько, вот. Техника всяческая, и посмотрите, с чем они ехали брать Украину. Они думали, что мы вообще какие-то, но тут оказались козаки українські, котрі розбили цих окупантів в пух і прах. Дивіться, вони їхали зі звичайними шоломами, зі щитами. Вони думали, що в нас проканає так, як в Москві, в Пітері або в іншому російському місті, але вийшло не так.
The stalemate around the objective, which is just 30 kilometers from the border, is not something that Russian military command expected. Significant losses of the men and armored vehicles also forced Russians to try a new tactic. Before the war, the territorial proximity allowed them to fill the city with sleeping agents that were supposed to help Russians quickly establish control over Kharkiv once the main forces secure the area. However, the plans have changed. Now, Russia tries to use them to set up more precise artillery strikes and prepare secret weapon warehouses inside the city. It's hard to estimate the effectiveness, as many agents were caught by territorial defense forces, but some preparations by saboteurs were still made. Using this fact, Russian command plans to send their elite special operation forces to infiltrate Kharkiv and use heavy weaponry hidden inside the city to secure main roads and crossings. On February 27th, several companies of the 2nd Guard Spetsnaz Brigade of the Russian Military Intelligence Service, each around 25 to 50 men, swiftly enter the gaps in the Ukrainian defenses on light Tiger infantry mobility vehicles and military trucks. They enter Kharkiv through Pyatikhatki, Tsirkuni and Dergachi, moving independently towards their objectives, which most likely were key highways, an airport, and a city center. However, due to a lack of reconnaissance, the elite Russian troops are quickly lost in the big city. As they cluelessly circle around the random civilian buildings, they occasionally get into firefights with territorial defense forces, which further distracts and slows them down. Meanwhile, the main Ukrainian forces quickly react to the reports of Russians inside Kharkiv and start to hunt them down. 92nd Mechanized Brigade deploys their light IFVs, such as BTR-4s, into the city, while the Freikorps Regiment, named after the volunteers recruited by the Frederick the Great during the 7 Years' War, tracks down the enemy. On one of the key streets that leads to the city center, Ukrainian forces meet with Russian Spetsnaz company that moves in a small convoy of 4 IMVs. Using high maneuverability and speed, BTR-4 catches up with invaders and opens fire. The autocannon of IFV shreds down the thin armor, and Russian troops abandon the vehicles. Luckily for them, they find cover in a school that turns out to be one of the secret spots where Russian saboteurs established a weapon warehouse. The Freikorps Regiment, reinforced with soldiers of the 92nd Brigade, Police Rapid Operational Response Unit, and Omega Anti-Terrorism Detachment, encircle the building, leaving no way out of the school for the enemy. They also catch one of the Russian soldiers that strayed from his group. Next, city defenders rush inside the school and engage in an intense firefight on the first and second floors of the building. As well-trained Russian forces get their hands on extra supplies, such as large number of grenades, Ukrainians have to retreat from the besieged building, and their attempts to storm the enemy fail. Before the second attempt, Ukrainians try to convince Russians to surrender, without much success. Then, another attack happens, but Ukrainians again have to retreat.
Відходим, відходим! Валу, дай!
One of the Russian Special Forces operatives uses a grenade launcher to hit and destroy the Ukrainian BTR-4, which provided suppressive fire with autocannon. 2 Russian soldiers escape while this happens. Once BTR-4 is incapacitated, both sides do not risk launching another breakthrough attack.
Слава Україні!
Next, Ukrainians request the support of another armored vehicle to suppress invaders who set up a strong defense inside the school. This time, the Ukrainian T-64 main battle tank arrives at the scene. From a safe distance, the tank makes a couple of shots. The gas pipes are severely damaged, which is immediately exploited by Ukrainians, who throw Molotov cocktails into the windows of the building and advance. The fire quickly spreads due to gas leaks, and soon the whole building turns into a massive fireball. Most invaders meet their end inside the building or after jumping out of windows, and the constant explosions will indicate that Russians indeed had an ammunition depot there. Apparently, they had plenty of mines in school, which hints that their initial plan was to first block the road, set up a checkpoint, and then defend the street that goes into the center of Kharkiv until the main forces breach the external perimeter. In total, the fight lasted for over 10 hours, but Ukrainians emerged victorious from it. 2 other similar groups of Russian Spetsnaz that infiltrated the city also failed to capture any objectives and withdrew at night with heavy losses. The second similar raid was planned on the night of March 7th, but due to bad coordination, the attack was postponed to the morning when the Ukrainian artillery strikes forced invaders to retreat before entering the city. After that, Russian troops never entered Kharkiv again. The invaders, however, continued their heavy shelling and missile attacks that took the lives of hundreds of city residents. On March 1st, a Russian cruise missile hit Kharkiv Regional State Administration, killing 29 civilians. On March 6th, one of the Su-34s that bombed Kharkiv was shot down over the city from the manpad. Both crew members ejected, but only one of the pilots survived. He was captured by the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces and later sentenced to 12 years of imprisonment for violating the laws and customs of war. The convicted turned out to be a deputy commander of the 6th Army of the Russian Air Force, who confessed that, realizing the illegality of the combat order, he did not refuse to comply with it and bombed the Kharkiv TV tower with 8 Fab 500 bombs. Because of such brutal attacks from air and ground, the city is on the verge of the humanitarian catastrophe, as many residents lose access to electricity, water, and telecommunication services. Over 500,000 people leave Kharkiv. During the course of the March, April, and May, the Ukrainian forces make slow but consistent progress, liberating areas around the city. Finally, when Russian troops completely withdraw from Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions in early April due to a lack of progress, they still maintain pressure on Kharkiv as one of their key objectives. The front lines stay almost the same from now on, and will significantly change only in September, when Ukraine will launch a counteroffensive to retake most of the Kharkiv region. But this is going to be a topic for one of our next videos. In conclusion, from the first days of the Russian invasion, Kharkiv turned into a deadly trap for Russian forces. The expected absence of resistance in what seemed to be a historically pro-Russian region turned out to be nothing but the desire of the Russian military command. In reality, the 92nd and 93rd Mechanized Brigades of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, as well as many other military units, successfully defended the city against all the odds. Russian agents and saboteurs were not effective because many Kharkiv residents took up arms and prevented attempts to spread panic, misinformation, and enemy sabotage. Months of hardships and constant shelling united the civilian population and fueled their devotion to the revenge cause, which led to the successful counteroffensive of the Ukrainian armed forces and the liberation of the most of the region in September 2022.